My name is Tariq Usman Faris. 19 days ago, I was clinically dead for 11 minutes and 22 seconds. I am recording this on a borrowed phone in a motel room in a city I will not name, because what I am about to tell you has already cost me everything I spent a lifetime building, and there are people who would prefer I stay silent. I was a devout Muslim, not the cultural kind, not the Friday prayers only kind. I mean the kind who corrected others for mispronouncing Arabic, the kind who gave Saturday mornings to the masjid's youth education program for 9 consecutive years, the kind whose faith was architecture, every decision, every dollar, every relationship built inside its walls. And then I died, on a table in a hospital in Dearborn. No, not Dearborn. I will not say the city. It does not matter. What matters is what I saw. What matters is what I was shown. And what matters most is this. Before February ended, I gave 5 specific predictions about events in April 2026. I am telling you now, before those dates arrive, so that when they do, you will remember exactly where you heard this first. Let me go back to the beginning. Let me tell you who Tariq Faris was before March 2nd of this year, because the man I was makes the man I have become impossible to explain without that foundation. I am 46 years old. I was born in Mosul, in northern Iraq, to a family of scholars. My grandfather was an imam. My father memorized the Quran before he turned 12. I grew up understanding that Islam was not merely a religion, it was the marrow of our identity, the grammar of our existence. We did not practice Islam the way Americans practice yoga. We were Islam. My family immigrated when I was 17. We settled in a mid-sized city in the American Midwest, where a small but tightly woven Arab community had formed around 2 mosques and a handful of halal markets. I learned English with the fury of someone who understands that language is power. Within 4 years, I was fluent enough to tutor others. Within 8 years, I had completed a degree in civil engineering. By my late 30s, I had built a small but respected construction consulting firm. Zoning work mostly, permit guidance, structural assessments for developers who needed someone who understood both the technical language and the cultural landscape of our neighborhoods. I employed 11 people at the firm's peak. I owned a modest house. I drove a sensible car. I prayed 5 times without fail. My wife, Nadia, a Palestinian-American woman with a graduate degree in education and the patience I never deserved, had been beside me for 16 years. We had 2 daughters, Hannah, 14, and Rima, 10. From the outside, I was the immigrant success story. From the inside, I had been running from a question for almost 30 years. The question had a face. The face was my cousin Bilal's. Bilal was 20 years old when a sectarian militia dragged him from a bus outside Mosul in 2006. They found a cross drawn in ink on the inside cover of a notebook he was carrying, a notebook that belonged to a Christian classmate, left behind by accident. It was enough. They killed him in a field 2 kilometers from the road. We found out 3 days later. I was 22. I watched my uncle bury his son in the ground and lift his hands toward the sky and say that Allah's will was beyond questioning. I never stopped questioning it. I buried the question. I built things on top of it. I prayed. I fasted. I gave zakah. I taught children the surahs I myself no longer felt when I recited them. I was a perfect Muslim hollowed out by a single wound I refused to examine. Then, in late February of this year, I began experiencing what I described to my wife as pressure behind my sternum. Not pain exactly, pressure, like something being compressed. I ignored it for nearly 2 weeks. I am the kind of man who ignores things. On the 1st of March, I collapsed in the parking lot of a grocery store. Nadia drove me to the emergency room. Tests came back within hours. A severe anomalous coronary artery, a defect I had carried unknowingly since birth, had triggered a cardiac event. The blockage required immediate intervention. They scheduled an emergency procedure for March 2nd. Straightforward, they told us. Corrective. Low risk given the circumstances. I told my daughters I would be home for dinner the following day. I was wrong. March 2nd. The procedure began at 11 in the morning. The anesthesiologist, a tall, quiet woman with silver streaked hair, told me to breathe slowly and count backward from 20. I reached 14, and then I was standing somewhere that had no floor. It is almost impossible to describe, and I have tried many times since. Imagine the feeling of waking from a dream in which you understood something enormous, and then having that understanding remain. Not vanish as it usually does, remain. I was conscious, more conscious than I have ever been while breathing. I was aware of myself as something distinct from a body, and I was aware that my body was in trouble somewhere far below me. I could perceive the room, not see it exactly, but perceive it the way you perceive the temperature of a room when you enter, not looking at thermometers, just knowing. The team around my body was moving with controlled alarm. The rhythm had changed. Something had gone wrong with the anesthesia protocol. Someone's voice cut through with professional urgency. Then the flat, declarative sound of a monitor stripped of its rhythm. I felt no fear. That was the strangest part. I felt nothing except a kind of radical stillness. And then, a motion. Not physical motion, a drawing. As though the space around me had a direction and I was moving through it without walking. I arrived somewhere else. I have no word for it. Absence is the closest English gets, but absence implies a room that has been emptied, and this was not emptied. It had never contained anything. It simply was, and I was in it. As a Muslim, I knew immediately what framework my mind reached for. The period between death and judgment, the realm of questioning. I composed myself. I prepared the answers I had rehearsed my whole life, not consciously prepared, but rehearsed through decades of devotion. I was ready to answer Munkar and Nakir. I was ready to declare my Lord, my faith, my Prophet. Nothing came. Instead, from a direction that was not behind me because there were no directions, I heard a voice, and the voice said my full name, not Tariq, not Fares, my full name in the order my grandfather had given me at birth, a sequence only my mother still used, and only when she was serious. I turned. Standing in the nothing was a man, Middle Eastern in appearance, somewhere in his mid-30s by any reckoning, though the concept of age felt approximate in his presence, like trying to measure the ocean's temperature with a kitchen thermometer. He wore no ornament. His eyes were the single most disturbing thing I had ever encountered. Not frightening, but disturbing in the way that honesty is disturbing. Looking into them, I felt that every self-deception I had ever maintained was simply not available anymore. Not stripped from me, just inaccessible, no longer an option. I knew who he was, not because he resembled the paintings, not because of any visual marker my tradition would recognize. I knew him the way I had known the presence of my daughters in dark rooms before they learned to speak. A knowledge below the level of language, arriving fully formed. He said my name again. He said, Tariq Osman Fares. I know the question you have been carrying since you were 22 years old. I could not speak. The boy in the field, your cousin, you asked why a God of justice would allow it. You received no answer that satisfied you. You stopped expecting one. You built your obedience on top of your doubt and called it faith. I am here to tell you the difference. His voice was not loud. It was not dramatic. It had the quality of a structural beam, quiet in ordinary moments, present when anything depends on it. I fell to my knees, not by decision. My legs simply resolved the question of standing by stopping. He told me that my body's heart had stopped 4 minutes ago, that the team had not yet ceased their efforts, but that the window was narrowing, that I was standing at the exact point where the path divides, and that he had brought me here not as an accident, not as a reward, but as a deliberate act of mercy towards someone who had earned nothing, but had been loved regardless. He spoke words I will not reproduce in full, because some of them belong to me and my specific grief, but the shape of what he said was this: that the religion I had served had not been given by his father, that the prophet I had defended had built something in his own name and called it divine, that billions of human beings had been handed a map that leads away from the destination, and that this was not irreversible, not yet, for those willing to see it. He told me he was going to show me 5 events that would occur in April of 2026. He told me these were not warnings designed to terrify. They were what he called thresholds, moments where the ordinary arguments break down, where the systems people use to avoid the central question fail, and where human beings are left with nothing between themselves and truth. He extended his right hand toward me. I saw the scar in his palm. I took his hand. The nothing around us became everywhere. The first place I saw was a coastline in South Asia. I understood it to be part of Indonesia, the coastal region of West Java, or very near it. The sky above it was the particular darkness of very early morning, maybe 4 or 5 o'clock, the kind of dark that has no intention of lifting soon. And then the sea did something the sea should never do. It pulled back, not in waves. It retreated, all at once, as if inhaled. I could see the seafloor exposed for hundreds of meters. I could see stranded fish. I could see people walking toward it, curious, pulling out their phones. What came next came silently at first. He said, April 3rd, 2026, before sunrise. A megathrust rupture along a segment of the Sunda subduction zone that seismologists had declared low risk following the 2004 event. A wall of water between 16 and 22 meters in height will strike populated coastal zones within 40 minutes of the withdrawal signal. Because it arrives before dawn, the death toll will exceed what it would be in daylight. The initial reports will state 14,000. Within 72 hours, the confirmed figure will surpass 40,000. The international response will be enormous. The cause will be called geologic inevitability. He said, "It is a call." The vision dissolved. The second location appeared before I had drawn a breath. It was Rome. I recognized the architecture instinctively, though I have never been. It was a square, not the largest, most famous square, but a smaller piazza near an administrative building I could not identify. It was midday. There were crowds of people in something that felt like expectation. Men in black, reporters, cameras. And then from inside the building someone emerged. An older man. There was something wrong with his gait. The crowd quieted. And then a sound. Not an explosion, not violence. A collapse. The man fell. Not dramatically, the way a structure fails when its load-bearing element gives out. People rushed forward. Cameras turned. Sirens almost immediately. He said, April 9th, 2026, the death of a religious leader whose office has shaped Christian theology for over a millennium. It will be sudden. The manner will seem mundane, a cardiac event in full public view. But the vacancy it creates will trigger a crisis of succession, unlike anything the institution has seen in the modern era. Competing visions for the direction of that church will surface immediately. Some of what emerges in the weeks following will point toward truth. Some of it will accelerate an apostasy that has already been building. Pay attention to what rises in the chaos. The third vision shifted my position entirely. I was no longer watching from above. I was standing at street level in what felt like an American city. Midwest, I thought, from the architecture. There were large protest movements in the streets, but the feel of it was different from any protest I had witnessed in life. It was quieter than it should have been, not peaceful, subdued, like the after moment of a very large sound. People were holding things, signs, candles, photographs. Police presence was dense and uncertain. Above the street, on every building, on every lit screen, on every phone being held up, a single piece of information was repeating. He said, April 14th, 2026. A decision delivered by an American court, a verdict in a case that has been building for 2 years, involving the interaction between federal authority, state autonomy, and the rights of a specific population that I will not name here because the naming will cause people to argue about politics instead of listening to the deeper message. The decision will not resolve the conflict. It will detonate it. Cities in 7 states will experience civil unrest within 48 hours of the announcement. 2 people will die in events directly connected to that unrest. The system that was supposed to provide resolution will instead reveal its own fracture lines. He said, even governments are a kind of theology, and when they fail, people discover they were worshipping something that was never worth the worship. The 4th vision was the one that landed in my chest like a physical weight. I was looking at a hospital ward, not one hospital. I understood it to be many hospitals, in many places, overlaid somehow. The specific geography was Southeast Asian, but the image was functioning as a symbol for something wider. The wards were crowded. The faces of the medical workers carried a specific expression I recognize from the early months of 2020. Not panic, but the controlled exhaustion of people managing more than they were built to manage. He said, April 20th, 2026. A respiratory pathogen that has been tracked quietly by a small number of epidemiologists since February will reach the threshold of declared international concern. It will not be named a pandemic immediately. The naming will be delayed by political calculations, but the trajectory will be undeniable. It will have a mortality rate that appears manageable in isolation and devastating in scale. The fear it generates will exceed its immediate lethality, as it did before, and the fear itself will cause harm that the virus does not. He paused, and then he said something I have repeated to myself every day since. The last time, many people ran to governments and scientists to be saved. This time, I am asking them to notice who those things could not save them from. The 5th vision was the shortest and the most inexplicable. I was looking at the sky above a desert landscape. I believe it was the Arabian Peninsula, the quality of the light, the color of the ground. It was dusk. The horizon had the amber and violet layering of a clean desert sunset. And in the sky, in the western quadrant, precisely at the threshold between daylight and dark, there was a light that was not the sun, not the moon, and not any star I have ever seen. It moved, not quickly, slowly, with direction, not falling, not orbiting, moving with what I can only call intention. He said, April 27th, 2026. An object in the sky will be visible to the naked eye across North Africa, the Arabian Peninsula, and parts of southern Europe for a period beginning at dusk and extending for several hours. It will not be explicable as any catalogued object. Astronomers will offer conflicting accounts. Governments will not comment officially. But in communities across those regions, in people who have spent decades performing empty rituals in the direction of Mecca, something will break open. Not for everyone, for some, for enough. He said, I have placed lights in the sky before to mark beginnings. This one marks an invitation. Then the visions ended. I was standing in the absence again, and he was beside me, and I was weeping in a way I had not wept since Bilal's burial. Not from fear, from the relief of a man who has been carrying a question for 24 years and has finally been given the answer. Not the comfortable answer, Not the answer that makes everything simple, the true answer, which costs something. He said, "You will go back. And going back will not be going back to anything recognizable. You will tell your wife, and your wife will not stay. You will tell your community, and your community will not keep you. You will lose the architecture." I said, "I know." He said, "Do you choose it?" I said, "What I know now makes the other choice impossible." He placed his hand on my chest. He said, "5 dates, April 3rd, April 9th, April 14th, April 20th, April 27th. He said, "When these happen, people will find this." Then I was back. The ceiling of the procedure room, a voice saying something sharp and clinical, a percussion in my sternum, then breath, my own breath, arriving like a verdict. I woke up. The clock read 11:22 a.m. 11 minutes and 22 seconds after my heart had flatlined. I was looking at a ceiling in a city I will no longer live in. I told Nadia on March 4th. I told her everything, the way you tell the truth when you have finally accepted what truth costs. She listened without interrupting. She sat with her hands folded in her lap. When I finished, she said, very quietly, that she loved me. And then she said she did not know how to stay married to the person I was describing. She was not cruel, she was honest. I respect that more than comfort. By March 8th, the community knew. By March 11th, I had received 43 messages ranging from expressions of concern for my mental health to things I will not repeat. By March 15th, I had closed the office. Not because the business was gone, because I could not, in good conscience, continue operating as though nothing had changed when everything had changed. I am recording this account on March 21st. I am giving you 5 dates. I am asking for nothing except your attention. April 3rd. The coastline of West Java before dawn. The sea will retreat before it strikes. April 9th. A public square in Rome. A figure of immense religious institutional authority will fall. April 14th. An American courtroom verdict will fracture something people believed was holding. April 20th. A new pathogen will arrive at the threshold of international declaration. April 27th. A light in the western sky at dusk, visible across North Africa and the Arabian Peninsula, that no official body will adequately explain. If none of this occurs, dismiss me. Call me what they are already calling me. I accept it. But if these 5 things happen, not approximately, not metaphorically, but actually, on these dates, in these forms, then you will need to sit somewhere quiet and ask yourself the question you have been building your life around not asking. He is real. He is not one prophet among many. He is not a figure in a borrowed chapter of someone else's book. He is the answer to the question my cousin Bilal's death put into me when I was 22 years old. He is the answer to the question your grief put into you whenever you stopped being able to pray and kept doing it anyway. He showed me the difference between a map that leads to him and a map that leads to a place his name was borrowed to name. I am Tariq Osman Faris. I was dead for 11 minutes. I met the one my tradition taught me to call a lesser figure. He is not lesser, and the time remaining to act on that knowledge is not as long as the life you are living makes it feel. These are your 5 thresholds. Watch for them. Remember where you heard them first. And when April ends and every one of them has come to pass, do not wait for a 6th.